And here, Magnus Carlsen comes. Hans Niemann in a very nice flowery shirt. And Magnus will make the first move. We know Hans Niemann has a chessball course coming out, the Joe Bava London. Should Magnus then not play that opening?
Yeah, Magnus has not played 1d4, which might lead towards the Jabava London system. Instead, we see a king's pawn opening from the world champion, and it's the Spanish. So Hans Niemann just reacting very solidly with black. 1e4, e5, locking things up. White is the first to castle the king, but play will start to revolve around the center of the board. Hans Niemann, okay, he takes a deep breath. What is he going to do here? Usually we see black develop the dark squared bishop out. There's a couple of squares you could choose. Black could push a pawn. Black can even capture white's pawn in the center of the board with the black knight. And he does that. One of the most ambitious options. We call this the open Spanish because things tend to open up very quickly. So black temporarily is a pawn up. But if you look at black's king, it's in the middle. It needs to get castled. So black is happy to give back a pawn in order to catch up with piece development. This is still very well-known stuff so far.
I have a question, actually, because we always talk about taking center. And that black knight, is that taking center since it's in the center, or is it not taking center because it's basically not aiming at any of the squares in the center?
That's a good question, actually,
Thank
Kaya.
you. Yeah.
I've never thought of it like that. Yeah, black's knight here, it's been very ambitious. It's grabbed a pawn, and it is actually supported by black's central pawn. But then again, it could be a target for white's pieces. So I think it comes with pros and cons. It could be what we call an octo knight, just controlling 8 squares, a really powerful piece, or black's knight in the center of the board could just get traded off. I'm expecting to see maybe Magnus at some point over the next move or two bring out his knight, the knight that's asleep on the left side, and challenge black's knight in the center. It's just too strong.
Yeah.
So, OK, he's just pushed a pawn first. This is still very standard as well. And now Hans Niemann will develop his dark squared bishop, most likely.
Yeah. And one of the things I have realised about this particular line that Hans Niemann has played is it's quite forcing. I mean, there's a long series of moves in the database. And I was just wondering, is he planning to out-prepare Magnus?
I think quite possibly.
Because yesterday I did notice from Hans Niemann's games that he was very, very well prepared in the opening. He convincingly beat David Anton in his specialty, the Jabava London. But it wasn't just David Anton, it was also Ding Lorena as well.
Yeah, some really impressive opening preparation from the teenager from Niemann. OK, there, he brought his bishop out. As predicted, white's knight and bishop. Wow, OK, white's knight and bishop were ganging up against the black knight, and we've seen some really quick moves now. We've actually seen a huge transition. Black has given up a knight and bishop in exchange for white's rook. But black does have a pawn in exchange, and look at the white king right now. It's forced slightly out into the open. And with black's last move, he's trying to open up the black rook at the top of the board on the same line as the white king. He's trying to open up to attack Magnus. But we've seen this before. This is still well known. This is actually kind of cutting-edge theory. It's debated at the top level in several games recently. Magnus himself had it, I think, from the white side last season on the tour. So, OK, we saw white give up another pawn. Kaya, you mentioned taking center. Look at those black pawns in the center of the board right now. They're super strong, backed up by black's pieces. But material is roughly level. White has a bishop and a knight. Black has a rook and 2 pawns in return. So rook and 2 pawns worth 7. 2 pieces, a bishop and a knight worth roughly 6, sometimes more. So, yeah, it's really tense, really complex. And the evaluation bar's been swinging left and right because even studying with computers, it's unclear who has the advantage. I think in practical terms, it's very difficult to play with white. So Magnus must have come armed with preparation, opening preparation to this game.
It
Yeah,
looks like
you'd expect that, right?
The black pieces look very developed, though.
Yeah, I looked at this once and I was terrified. I was just too scared to play it with white because if you look at white's pieces, half of them are asleep. Also, the white king a bit open, a bit airy, and black's central pawn's just too strong. But then again, if white's bishops come to life, if the 2 white bishops, which are actually pointing towards the king side, if they can start creating some threats, if the white knights can start hopping forward, it's nice to have minor pieces in certain types of positions. So Magnus has to try and just survive the next few moves, and then the white minor pieces, the knights and bishops, might come to life. But it's scary. And I think Magnus is being brave going into this. Hans is being very ambitious, playing such a kind of complex line against someone so strong as Magnus.
Cool. Yeah, and I do have to say, up until Hans's last move, stepping forward with the queen 2 squares, the players were actually following the game that you referenced. That was Magnus Carlsen against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov in the tour finals. There, Magnus actually won. So here, I'm just taking a look at my database, and I can see that the scores are I would say, edging in black's favour.
Okay.
So it's a sharp line. Players who just recently played it, Fabiano Caruana played this against Jordan van Forest very recently in the Tata Steel. Eric Hansen also played it against Jordan van Forest. There it wasn't very successful for Eric. And also Maxime Vachier-Lagrave has also played it.
Okay, so some real pedigree, some real giants of chess playing this opening. And Magnus now, he's brought his bishop out, and to me, that's slightly mysterious. It looks like white's bishop is active, but it's actually hitting thin air. It's not actually attacking any pieces. It could provoke a pawn push later by one of black's pawns near the king, just to kick that bishop away. But maybe Magnus is hoping to loosen things up around the black king. Jovanka, has this one been played before?
No, hasn't been played before.
Brand new move.
But yes and no, because it has been analysed. Okay. Someone has gone into the database and had a check. Hey, what happens if white develops the bishop to the g5 square? And they've analysed two moves. This was actually in June 2021. They analysed directly attacking the white knight sitting on f3, or a very kind of calm, sensible move, which is also just to tuck the king away into the corner.
Okay, so two very sensible moves. As you mentioned, tucking the king away in the corner. Now the king is super safe. If you want to keep it even safer, an idea we actually mentioned yesterday on our broadcast, the bishop could always drop back to actually keep the light square safe around the black king. So a very nice defensive maneuver. But we know Hans Niemann. We know he's not... I don't think he wants to play safety first chess. He's not a defensive player by nature. He wants to be aggressive, ambitious. He wants to attack even players like Magnus Carlsen, no fear. So a move we might well see is pawn to e4, attacking this white knight. And now this white knight, once it is dislodged, I'm expecting it to maybe land in the centre. Black can start to bring pieces as well towards the white king. For example, the black knight can move forward, trying to maybe cause an attack later on. Black's pawns could start what we call a pawn storm, an avalanche of pawns, all of black's pawns rushing forward. This would be very, very tense. And to be honest, the more I look at this, the more I'm attracted to it for the black side. I think Hans Niemann has a chance to start going on the offensive against the world champion, and he knows no fear, and normally that type of attitude will give you results, even against the best players. You can't just play quiet moves. Even though this is very sensible, it just feels a bit too slow. So, OK, what will Hans do? Will he play a quiet move like tucking his king in the corner, or will he start pushing pawns forward, creating threats, and forcing Magnus onto the back foot? Yeah, really, really tense position. I'm loving these two pawns now for black. I'm loving this open file as well for the rook. And, OK, Magnus will have to really produce some defensive ideas. And, of course, he goes for it. The most aggressive move there by Hans Niemann, pushing a pawn forward, hitting this white knight.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you a question just based on my observations of Hans Niemann. So he's incredibly confident, and so this leads me to believe that he's an optimist. And I was going to ask you, are you an optimist or a pessimist when it comes to chess?
Ooh.
That's a good question. Actually, I saw a meme recently where, OK, the black knight does indeed land in the centre, so we're expecting this, and now the pawn's going to push forward, kick the knight. But yeah, I saw a meme on Twitter recently, and it was just a picture of a glass, and obviously the question is the glass half full or half empty? And I think someone like Hans Niemann would say the glass is full. So yeah, it's. I think I've always been a bit of a pessimist. I try and look for the pros and positives in my position, but I also like to take the safety first option if in doubt, especially when I'm low on time. So.
But the safety at first option is also really good because it means you're always considering what your opponent is going to be thinking about.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just optimist, you do have to be careful that you don't swing all the way to the other side and just be reckless and not consider that your opponent too has a chance at playing the game.
Yeah, you need to be objective. That's the main thing. You have to know roughly the evaluation of the position so you can take major decisions. Yeah, you can't be too optimistic that you forget everything, but you can't be too pessimistic where you just play for the draw or play passively, put your piece on bad squares. So, OK. Meanwhile, a couple of moves. White's other knight jumping forward, the white knight that was sat next to the king, and black's bishop has just retreated one square. Very solid there, this last move by Niemann, but he has this idea that we mentioned of black's c-pawn coming down the board and hitting white's knight in the centre. If that had happened on the last turn, white's knight in the centre could have captured the black bishop, and after that trade, I think that would have favoured Magnus. So, OK, still really interesting stuff. Both players playing quite quickly up to this point. We're already on move 19. Both players have over 13 minutes left. So, yeah, I mean, I think both players have started really, really well today.
Already a cool game.
It
Really
is
cool game. Really balanced.
incredibly exciting. And for me, I'm just looking at the position and I'm considering David's idea, attacking the knight with a pawn. And suddenly those 3 pawns in the middle of the board look really, really scary. And the question for white is, should they take some action against this, step backwards with the knight, or should they just go, well, fine, it's not a problem? The pessimist in me is thinking, take action, don't allow it.
Yeah.
But then...
The optimist in you, what does the optimist in you say, Jovanka?
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. Step forward with the queen.
Just forget what black's doing.
Exactly. The knight will retreat once it's attacked, and then the question becomes, well, what is black going to be doing? I don't know which wolf is winning, actually, the battle there. I think probably the cowardly wolf.
I agree. OK, Magnus isn't a coward, though, and he goes for one of the optimistic approaches. He's actually just ignoring black's pawn pushes. So black now could pick up that c-pawn and push it 2 squares forward, hitting white's knight in the centre of the board, but the white knight will just retreat, and at the moment, Magnus has everything under control. The reason he's retreated his bishop there to the edge of the board is because he wants to kind of zigzag his bishop back, this white dark square bishop that has moved. He wants to drop it back 1 square just to kind of eye up the black queen. The black knight and black queen are on the same diagonal. So really sneaky move there from Magnus. And yeah, the optimistic, pessimistic thing, I think that affects me the most in positions where you have an option to attack, but it involves some risk. When I was young, I would just go for the attack every time. I was confident it would work. I wouldn't even calculate sometimes. I just trust myself. But these days, the older I get, the more I believe in defence, and that's maybe why I'm pessimistic. And I know Hans, for sure, he is believing any time he gets a chance to throw pawns forward, throw pieces forward.
Yeah, it's an intriguing question, because I've been kind of thinking a lot about this issue, especially when it comes to life's approaches, whether you should be looking with a gap mentality or a gain mentality. And they were saying, if you're an optimist, it allows you to be more creative in life and also in chess. And it enables you just to see things out of the box. And I must admit, Magnus has been very optimistic in his position. He's like, I don't care. I don't mind about black attacking the knight. And as a result of that, he's come up with a really unconventional way of manoeuvring his bishop to a better diagonal. And suddenly, white's position has a lot of harmony, whereas maybe you wouldn't have thought about that if you'd just been instinctively reacting to black's plans.
Yeah, true. If you compare the white knights as they are now to how they were 5 moves ago, white's knights were previously just passive, not doing much. This bishop that you just mentioned, Jovanka, the white dark squared bishop, it's looking great at the side of the board, actually. And it will look even better next move, especially compared to how it was a few moves ago. So Magnus is improving with every turn, and Hans needs to do that.
Yeah.
As well in the meantime.
Has Magnus become more pessimistic with age in his style as well?
I wouldn't say necessarily pessimistic, just maybe more practical. Occasionally, we see him take a quick draw in the final round of tournaments just to secure his place. We saw in the 2016 World Championship match, he took a draw against Sergei Karyakin in the last game with white very quickly, just to ensure he got to the playoffs. So I think he's got his eye on the result more than maybe beauty in each game these days. But I think that's natural. In sport, players, athletes, they tend to retire maybe in their 30s because physical things are taking over, and it's hard to keep battling and keep kind of pushing yourself. But I think in chess, the reason maybe we get slightly worse with age is because we become less creative. And at least for me, and at least a lot of other chess players I know, we often end up playing maybe passive chess, solid chess, rather than going for all-out attacks, rather than playing aggressive openings. So
what is the prime age for chess?
They say 35.
Yeah.
OK, so Magnus actually isn't there yet.
Yeah, I would say maybe slightly earlier, but I think you can go on for longer at a high level. But it's definitely hard. I would love to be Hans's age again, 18, attacking every turn. And wow. Okay.
Hang on. Wow, that's an amazing move.
Yeah, and the reason we both reacted there is because Magnus has just given up a knight. The knight has just jumped forward, attacking the black queen, but this knight is attacked twice by black's bishop and by black's rook, and it's only defended once. We have to investigate this. It's either genius or it's going to backfire on the world champion. On the last turn, if we rewind just to show what Hans did, he actually created a double attack, hitting this bishop and hitting the white knight with his queen, and Magnus reacted by jumping forward. So this knight actually has many purposes here. It's attacking the black queen, but it's also defending the bishop, as we mentioned, and defending its own knight. So you have to remove it. What else? If you take this knight, Magnus's idea is actually to maybe recapture first, and after the rook takes, white is a piece down, but after queen takes pawn, this is a check, and another double attack. So it's all about double attacks right now. It's all about multi-purpose moves. And here, after black blocks the check or runs out of the check, you would just lose the rook in the corner. This would actually end in a back rank checkmate. So Magnus has some serious threats. And Hans, has he missed this move? Maybe he's forgotten that the queen is going to take this pawn and it's going to be devastating. How is he going to deal with this? I'm shocked the evaluation bar is on black side so far, because I don't see how you react.
I also don't see how to react as well. And the more I look at it, you know, black can't even just go, oops, I made a mistake, didn't see that move my queen away, because, you know, if you do that, then there's going to be a knight check at the very least, or you can even be flashy and go queen takes pawn.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
better to play safe and go knight check.
But it's the same idea after the king moves. Now you can play queen takes pawn. This knight protected by white's bishop on the side of the board. We mentioned white's minor pieces, the bishops and knights coming to life. And after a queen trade now, if we just do a quick count, white has a bishop and a knight, and also very strong bishops and knights for the black rook. Yes, black has a pawn, but this guy is under attack. This guy is under attack in the middle of the board. Black has too many weaknesses. White's pieces are better than the black rooks. And this just looks winning for white. So what is in store here? What could Hans be thinking about? Let's go back to the players. Maybe there's a sneaky knight check. Maybe there's some tactics, but either way, Magnus finding we talked about creativity. He still has some left. He found there a really creative move, and Hans needs to deal with his problems. Everything attacked.
Wow. What a beautiful move from Magnus. I don't see a response. I think Hans Niemann just blundered.
Yeah.
He was careless and was too much in his own head thinking about attacking, and he's just missed this wonderful, wonderful move, because at first sight you think, well, the knight can't just go there, and often stronger players will actually rule out this type of move just because automatically, you know, because they're like, no, it's covered, square's covered, don't need to do anything else.
Yeah.
And this is what's happened here. And incredible by Magnus.
And I did see before Magnus made that move, he was sitting in deep thought with his head in his hands while actually Hans was making his move. It seems to be something he's planning.
Yeah, maybe Magnus had kind of seen this trick, this kind of trap in advance, and he was kind of hoping Hans would fall into it, but also Magnus was just trying to calculate ahead to figure out that it does indeed work. Because actually, just thinking about it now, Magnus, his previous move, it relied on this trick. If the black queen did swing across, as it did, then white would have been in big trouble if this knight move wasn't available. And as Jovanka mentioned, I think this is called an invisible move in a way. So it's putting a piece on a square that looks like it's well covered by the enemy pieces. But often it's the most effective because 3 or 4 pieces might be covering the same square. But if you put something on that square, only one of your opponent's pieces can take it, and you often ruin the opponent's coordination. So yeah, right now, black's coordination is just ruined. White, meanwhile, just too many threats. And what's happened to the evaluation bar? I'm surprised because I'm like you, Jovanka. I don't see what black does.
So you would have placed it to the other side.
Yeah, to
how
white
far?
side.
How far on Magnus's side? How big of an advantage would you say?
This looks a winning advantage,
Wow.
so it would be over +1. Okay, so he captures the knight. Okay, that's not going to change much because, well, one knight was on f5, another knight appears. And I'm thinking maybe Hans can try to confuse things a little bit.
Yeah,
maybe throwing a knight check. I mean, maybe now it's too late.
So should he now not take with the rook like you showed us earlier?
If black takes with the rook, after the queen comes up the board with that double attack, white wins immediately. So that knight is poisoned. You cannot capture it. But what else? You have to move the black queen in that case. Or, as Jovanka mentioned, maybe throw in the black knight, give a check to the white king just to, again, ruin the coordination between your opponent's pieces. But I don't see that working, really.
Okay, he does that. Okay.
But, OK, what is Magnus going to do? Is he going to be really sneaky and capture with his queen?
Yep.
He has captured with his queen. So giving up his queen, but the black queen would have been captured if black had captured the white queen. So black instead flicking in a check. There's some crazy tactics now.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, so many unexpected moves. We just have to show this. If we just rewind 2 moves here, black gave a check, hitting the white king with the knight. And rather than play the most obvious move, pawn takes knight, which would have allowed rook takes knight. And naturally now the central pawn is guarded, so white can't play queen takes pawn check. This was really sneaky by Hans, but instead Magnus, in this position, played queen takes knight. Again, a bit of an invisible move, not obvious, but now if the queen is captured, knight takes queen is a check. Black has to recapture. And here we, for example, after pawn takes pawn, we compare 2 bishops against one of the black rooks. The 2 bishops are simply better. 2 pieces are better than one in this situation. So instead, black gave a check. Now the queen is safe, hitting the white king. But Magnus, how's he reacted? He's blocked with his queen. And after we see a trade of queens in this position, again, we do a count, 2 bishops against black's rook. And yeah, the bishops are simply going to be too powerful. Also, look at black's pawn structure. It looks nice in the center, but these pawns are weak, these doubled pawns. And also, these pawns are actually completely controlled by this white bishop. This bishop controls the whole diagonal. They can never march forward. White is simply going to bring the rook to the center, bring this bishop to a better diagonal, and start targeting the black pawns and maybe even the black king later in the game. I think this is going to be quite one-sided now. It feels like the 2 bishops are just too powerful. They control everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, we talk about minor pieces and rooks, but 2 bishops are nearly always better than 1 rook.
Yeah. And I have to just admire Magnus's last move, because whilst I perhaps would have centralised my rook immediately, he takes the time out, as always, to improve this worst placed piece. He's like, OK, well, the bishop's not doing much. Let's improve it with time by attacking the pawn on b6. And then he can get on with the plan of just attacking those pawns located on the light squares. And yeah, I do agree with you. I think it's almost game over for Hans Niemann.
Yeah, maybe we're being too pessimistic here, but I think we're just being realistic, actually, in this situation. If black, for example, defends this pawn that's under fire, as you mentioned, Ivanka, then the rook just comes across. Black is helpless. But you just can't defend these 2 pawns in the center once the bishop arrives on this diagonal.
Right.
All of black's pawns are going to drop like dominoes now.
Yeah, I do remember a long, long time ago, my brother laughing at one of my games, and it was one of these scenarios where it was a rook versus a bishop and knight, and he was just like going to me, hey, you do realise that 2 pieces or work better than 1? And I'm like, OK, yeah, I'd never really thought about that. But it is a case of maths. There's 2 attackers here, in this case, the bishop and the rook, and also 2 bishops, and they're just going to be facing a rook. So,
yeah, there's 3 of these guys now, and they're all going to gang up on pawns, and there's only 2 pieces to defend those pawns.
And it's just simple maths. And yeah, really sad situation for Hans Niemann. It's not really what he wanted. He was all gung-ho yesterday. He was really, gearing himself for a hard-fought fight. And especially because he had mentioned in the Air Things Masters, in their encounter, he had been really ambitious. Yeah. And this had turned round in Magnus's favour. And now here, it's just one-way traffic.
Yeah, and just noticed there, Hans has probably the best air quality we've seen throughout the entire tour.
Oh, yeah.
There's lots of green circles there, but yeah, unfortunately, it's not going to help him in the position. And it was just 1 move, one move. He underestimated Magnus's trick. This knight jump we mentioned, that knight on f5 will thrive, the rhyme that we came up with. But sometimes 1 move is all it takes. And I expect white's rook to actually come up to the centre of the board right now. There we go. And there's actually a threat. The rook wants to capture the pawn next to it because there's a pin on black's central pawn, and that black king is actually caught in the crossfire. Just no way to save your pawns now. Black's pawns in the centre of the board are doomed. And Hans, he's trying to focus, but slight shake of the head there. And not much else to say. The world champion, we've seen a bit of shaky form from him in the prelim stages in the past, but this is just a matter of technique, and he's also a phenomenal endgame player, so he should be able to wrap this one up. And
look at that, Liam Le, another win for him, taking him to 13 points on top of the table, winning against Gawain Jones. Your fellow Englishman is really struggling in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, it's not the end of the tournament. There's still lots and lots of games left, so, we do wish Gawain all the best of luck. And there you go, 1 pawn is going to fall off the board.
Yeah. That central pawn.
Definitely.
White can maybe just take it right now. Knowing Magnus, he might not rush. He can push some pawns himself. He can, he's got all the time in the world.
He's a maximalist, isn't he? So now I agree with you. You know, push a pawn, attack the rook. Oh no, okay, he takes it.
Yeah, that is up for grabs, that pawn. And also maybe a small detail, but an important one. Now black's rook cannot come to attack this white bishop in the centre of the board, which would actually be very strong for black, apart from the fact white's bishop, the dark square bishop, can actually come to the side back where it came from earlier and deliver a nasty check. So, brutal.
It's like everything has gone wrong for Hans. You know, it's like even this queen trade where he get into this ending, it wasn't really great for him because of the pawn structure. And even now, you know, his one chance of generating counterplay, like you say, denied.
Yeah, when it rains, it pours, unfortunately.
Yeah. And well, whilst we're waiting for Hans Niemann to make a decision, I do have a nice selfie to show you. Can I quickly show it to you? It's from Ari. And Ari is watching football for the eyes and chess for the ears. Thank you, Ari. What an evening. Lucky that the commentary is so good that you can do both. And there you can see.
Yeah.
Watching.
Oh, so he's at an actual
football match. Yeah.
Wow.
I know, very
Impressive.
incredible. So a big shout out to Ari. And remember, if you do want to tweet us your questions, your selfies, then you can use the hashtag #ChessChamps.
And can we recognize that arena, David? I know Tottenham, West Ham currently playing. Watford, Everton. No, that's not being played today.
Ari, you can hear us, so let us know which match you're at. And, OK, meanwhile, just a couple of moves. Hans deciding his pawns are going to drop anyway, eventually. He gave up one of his doubled pawns in order to open a line for the black rook. So we've been a bit negative about Hans's chances of saving this game. We've been predicting the future and thinking it's going to be a white win. But he's still fighting. He's still creating counterplay. So this black rook on an open file, it actually threatens a deadly check if black has a move to bring it down to the bottom of the board and trap white's king on the back rank. But unfortunately, Magnus spots that idea and going to grab a pawn, he's created also, meanwhile, an escape route for the white king. And suddenly, white has an extra pawn. Earlier, black had a whole army of pawns, but now they are starting to fall. And white's king dancing away from the checks. Even if the black rook goes and grabs one or two pawns, the bishops will pick up even more pawns in the process.
Yeah, I think all that Hans will grab is one pawn, and Magnus won't allow him to grab anything else.
Yeah, so bit sneaky from Magnus Carlsen. If black's rook actually comes up on the b file and captures the pawn 2 squares in front of it, then the white dark square bishop, will drop back with a check and a double attack. You have to keep your rook and king as far away apart from each other, otherwise the bishops might trap that rook. So it's looking like not much chance anymore. White's bishop in the centre of the board, also hitting a pawn on the other flank.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. You know, just a really unlucky scenario for Hans Niemann. You know, makes one mistake and
so
everything
brutal.
goes wrong. And, you know, all his pieces are in the most unfortunate squares and just no way out. And
Running out of pieces as well now.
Yeah.
But in that moment, so Hans Niemann, I don't know if we should call it a blunder, an inaccuracy, but how impressed are you with Magnus finding that plan and Magnus's play in this game?
I'm highly impressed, to be honest. I mean, firstly, he looks super focused, which hasn't always been the case in the prelims. But secondly, even after he got that chance, he's been ruthless.
Yeah.
I mean, he actually traded off everything, the queens, the rooks, pawns, just to make it as safe as possible. And he's still got this advantage of 2 bishops against 1 lone rook. So yeah, Magnus, actually, if we analyse this, he's probably played a perfect game.
Wow.
I don't think we can fault any of his moves. And meanwhile, Hans has tried. He's only actually made 1 mistake, Hans, but at this top level, that's all it takes.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are different types of mistakes. You know, you have your slight inaccuracies where the game evaluation doesn't change that much. You have blunders where, you know, you kind of, your opponent has the initiative, has the flow, and then you have like game-changing blunders.
Yeah.
And OK, there you go. You can see it. Hans Niemann has resigned. Magnus Carlsen has won.
Wow, it's over. A win for Magnus Carlsen to start off.